It's going. Okay. It's been about 12 hours. The dough has almost doubled in size here, the bulk. And I can tell that if I leave this overnight, it's going to overproof. And we don't want that, so we will divide and shape it now. We're doing 2 loaves, so I'm going to set up with an old piece of sheet that you can use linen or pretty much any fabric, but we're going to cover it with some flour. I'll spread that in just to help it not stick once I put the shaped dough ball into it. Got this tomato lid that's roughly the shape of a ball of dough, so I'm going to put that underneath. We'll set this aside for now. Next, I am going to lightly flour this surface, and helps to have my hand a bit floury for this next part. I'm going to flip this upside down onto the floured surface I've just created. I'm using my hands to sort of pull all that sticky dough out of there and kind of stick it to that. You can kind of gather it up with your fingers, and that way you don't really waste much of this. Set this guy aside. I actually like to put a little bit of water in this, because if I take too much time shaping, that hardens like concrete and gets pretty difficult to clean. So I put some water in there, and then I'm going to put the lid back on top. So I'll come back to that later and clean it. But for now, got some flour and dough stuck to my hand. Just going to rub that off. I want my hands to be dry for this part. And get a little bit more flour. Put that on the dough, roughly in the middle. Got a drywall knife. You can use pretty much anything to split the dough in half. I like using this. I'm going to cut it right down the middle, and then I'm going to flip it over. And if we remember, the dough was proofing right side up. I flipped it upside down, so now it's sort of top side down with that skin that was exposed to the air. That skin, want to pay attention to that, because that is what's going to hold together nicely and shape into a dough ball nicely. So we're actually going to flip both of these over and get that skin, which is now slightly floured, skin side up. Next, we actually want the dough to stick a little bit to the surface when we move it around with the knife. So I'm going to use the knife, and actually my hand could use a bit more flour to help move this around. I'm going to gather and tuck this dough into a bit of a ball. And then if you come around to this side, you can see that this part has been cut, right? So that's all exposed. I want to actually tuck that skin over the exposed part. So I'm going to use my knife to just snow plow and push that side underneath. So now the skin has stretched and covered the whole surface. I'm going to do that again this way, snow plow, and use my hand to sort of roll and tuck. And it kind of rolls it into a nice ball. And I'm going to tuck it under a bit, just like that. And then once it's roughly in the shape I like, I'll kind of get both of my hands with some flour on it. Just kind of work it like that. And tuck it underneath. I usually let that sit for about 20 minutes or so out on the counter, so it can kind of heal together into that shape. It'll remember that shape nicely. And then after that 20 minutes or so, I take that basket I've created, I powder the surface sort of beside the dough ball I've just created, flip it over, gather it up, put it in there. I'm going to put a little more flour on top just to help it not stick to the fabric as I tuck it in for its good night's sleep in the fridge, because we'll bake these in the morning. They'll rise a little bit more in the fridge. I got my bag because I don't want to lose all the moisture in that, otherwise it might sort of lose a lot of its moisture and dry out in the fridge more than I want it to. So I'm going to create a nice little sealed off balloon bag. We'll put this in the fridge, and that is ready to bake in the morning. So that's going to start its cold proof overnight. It's going to develop a little bit more of that sourdough characteristic flavor. We'll do the same thing with this guy, and we'll have 2 loaves to bake in the morning.